Christmas Eve didn't fall softly over the city. It hardened. It turned every street into a thin, glassy argument between tires and gravity, between the truth and whatever people could get away with saying happened. Officer Ethan Cole drove with both hands on the wheel, not because he needed to, but because it kept his body honest. The patrol SUV's heater hummed. The dash lights glowed like embers. Outside, the world was a slate of snow and sodium street lamps, the air full of that particular silence winter created when it wanted to make every sound feel like a confession. Shadow sat behind the metal partition, upright and still, not relaxed, assembled, every muscle where it belonged, every breath measured. Ethan didn't look back to check her. He didn't have to. Shadow had been with him long enough that he could feel her attention the way you could feel a storm's pressure change before the first crack of thunder. When she shifted, it meant something. Dispatch crackled through the speaker. Unit 12, respond. Possible single-vehicle accident. Caller reports a car into a ditch near Riverside Service Road. Unknown injuries. Tow requested. Copy, Ethan answered. His voice came out calm, controlled, the way it always did. A voice that didn't tell the world what he felt. A voice that kept the world from thinking it could push him. He clicked on his lights, but not the siren. The roads were ice. Sirens made people do dumb things. He'd spent too long cleaning up the aftermath of dumb things. As he turned onto Riverside, the city thinned into industrial edges, chain-link fences, shuttered lots, utility poles with frost crusting their lines. The river ran somewhere beyond the trees, black and thick, moving beneath sheets of ice like it was trying not to be noticed. Then Shadow shifted. Not a full alert, no barking, no frantic movement, just a subtle rise in her spine, a forward tilt of her head. Ethan felt it as clearly as if someone had whispered in his ear. He slowed. At the edge of his headlight beam he saw it, a set of fresh tracks, 2 tires wide, too straight to be accidental, cutting from the road toward a ditch that should have been deep enough to swallow a vehicle. But the skid marks didn't look right. They were there, sure, dark lines etched into the frosted surface, but they were neat, almost rehearsed, like someone had taken time to make them look like panic without the messy truth of actual panic. Ethan's eyes flicked over the scene the way they always did, road crown, shoulder, impact point, surrounding snow for footprints. His brain ran the quiet math of cause and effect. He pulled in and killed the lights. Let the patrol headlights wash over everything without the strobing drama. Shadow, he said softly. Her ears angled, waiting. He stepped out into the cold. The air hit him like a slap that didn't bother apologizing. His breath fogged. Snow creaked under his boots, clean, sharp, too loud in the quiet. The accident sat ahead, half down an embankment. A dark SUV angled awkwardly, front end buried in powder, rear tires still on the edge as if it had been placed there rather than lost control into it. One headlight was out. The other shone dimly through packed snow like an eye that didn't want to be seen watching. Ethan's gaze went to the driver's seat. Empty, no slumped body, no blood on the steering wheel, no frantic waving. He didn't like emptiness. He walked the perimeter, careful to step beside obvious footprints, not on top of them. He was used to scenes where one careless boot could erase something important. Evidence wasn't dramatic. It was fragile. It died easily. Shadow whined once, quiet, low. Ethan opened the rear door and clipped her leash. "Work," he murmured. Shadow moved out as if the world narrowed into one purpose. Her nose went down. She didn't search in wide theatrical loops. She threaded herself along the edges where humans tried to avoid leaving what they were. Ethan watched her body language more than her path. Shadow's ears, her tail, the small pauses she took as the air told her a story. There was a reason he trusted her. She paused near the front bumper, nostrils flaring. Ethan crouched and ran his gloved hand along the snow near the grill. He brought his fingers up, looked. Red, not a lot, but real, blood, fresh enough that it hadn't turned brown, fresh enough that the cold hadn't stolen its color yet. Ethan's jaw tightened. He scanned the immediate area again. No human drag marks, no pooled blood, no scattered glass consistent with a violent crash. The broken headlight lens looked removed, not shattered outward, manufactured. Shadow moved toward the rear of the SUV and stopped so suddenly her leash went taut. Her head lifted, her nostrils worked. Her posture turned rigid in a way Ethan knew meant more than fear. It meant recognition, He followed her gaze. Behind the SUV, partially hidden in a drift and shadow, was a crate. Not the kind you used for groceries. Not the kind people kept in the back of a car for a casual trip. This was a reinforced transport crate, metal bars, heavy latches. And inside it, a sound. Not a human sound. A thin, strained whimper that cut straight through the winter and landed in Ethan's chest like a hook. Ethan moved closer. He crouched, peered through the bars. There were dogs inside, several, shapes layered in the cramped space. One lifted its head, eyes reflecting the patrol headlights in frightened crescents. Another pressed into the corner, trembling so hard its whole body shook. And one didn't lift its head at all. Ethan's world narrowed. He felt his pulse in his throat. Not anger yet, not even fear. Something colder. A sense of wrongness so sharp it felt like the air had edges. "Shadow," he said, voice barely above breath. Shadow pushed her nose close to the bars, inhaled, then looked up at Ethan. Her eyes held that intelligence that always unsettled people who didn't understand working dogs, an intelligence that wasn't human but wasn't simple either. It said, "This matters." Ethan reached for the latch. It was locked with a small padlock. Whoever staged this didn't want anyone opening it until it was already gone. His radio hissed. "Dispatch again, casual. Unit 12, tow's en route, ETA 5 minutes. Company says they know the area." Ethan's grip tightened on the radio. "Cancel the tow," he said. A pause. Unit 12, caller requested." "Cancel it," Ethan repeated, calm as stone. "This is now a police hold. Send animal control and EMS. Priority." Dispatch hesitated. In that hesitation, Ethan could hear the invisible weight of Christmas Eve, reduced staffing, supervisors off duty, the city wanting quiet. "Copy," dispatch finally said, voice tight. "Animal control en route. EMS notified." Ethan didn't relax. He knew how systems worked. They didn't resist with fists first. They resisted with delays. He stood, stepping back from the crate. Shadow stayed close, body angled toward the crate like she was physically shielding it. Ethan scanned the road, and then he saw the tow truck lights cresting the hill. 5 minutes was an optimistic lie. Whoever called it in already had them close. The tow rolled in, big and confident, amber beacons turning the snow into a rotating warning. It pulled to the shoulder with practiced ease. The driver stepped out, bulky in a work jacket, boots crunching ice like he owned it. "Evenin'," the driver called, smiling too easily. "Heard you got one in the ditch." Ethan didn't return the smile. "Accident scene is on hold," Ethan said. "Tow's canceled." The driver's smile faltered, then returned in a different form, more patient, like dealing with a kid who didn't know the rules. Dispatch said tow was requested. "Dispatch is updating," Ethan said. He kept his tone polite, not because he respected the man, because he didn't want an excuse for drama. "Step back from the vehicle." The driver's gaze flicked past Ethan, landed on the crate. Something sharpened in the man's eyes, just a fraction, recognition, or annoyance, or both. "What's that?" the driver asked, nodding toward it. "Evidence," Ethan replied. The driver's jaw shifted. He took a step anyway. Shadow's head snapped toward him. A low growl vibrated through her chest, not wild, not loud, a warning that did not require translation. The driver stopped. "Whoa," he said, raising his hands. "Easy, easy. I ain't here to—" "Step back," Ethan said again, still calm. The driver's eyes narrowed. "Look, officer, I got a job to do. Christmas Eve, you know. Folks need roads clear." Ethan's gaze stayed steady. "Road will stay blocked until I say otherwise." The driver hesitated, then pulled his phone out. Ethan didn't move. He'd seen this too many times. The quick call to someone who believed they could rewrite reality over speakerphone. The driver spoke quietly, then glanced at Ethan as if measuring him. Then he walked back toward his truck, still on the phone. Ethan watched him go, then turned back to the crate. He knelt and examined the padlock. Cheap, not hardened steel. The kind that looked secure until it met a bolt cutter. He didn't have bolt cutters, but he had a patrol kit. He dug through his gear, found a small pry tool, and worked it into the lock's weak point with controlled pressure. The metal protested. Ethan didn't force it. He coaxed it. It popped with a sharp click. He opened the crate door slowly, keeping his body between Shadow and the dogs. The smell hit him first. Blood, urine, fear sweat, and cold. The dogs inside shifted, pressed back. One tried to crawl into the smallest possible space, as if making itself invisible could make the world kinder. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't reach in immediately. He knew better than to overwhelm a terrified animal. He held his hand out, palm down, low. "Hey," he said softly. "You're okay. You're safe." He wasn't sure if he believed the last word, but he said it anyway. Sometimes you spoke safety into existence before the world agreed. Shadow made a soft sound beside him, almost a sigh. Her presence helped. It always did. Dogs trusted other dogs faster than they trusted humans. Ethan checked the one that wasn't moving. He found a pulse, weak but there. He felt a surge of relief so sudden it almost made him dizzy. "Hang on," he whispered. Behind him, tires rolled over ice again, a second vehicle. Ethan's head lifted. A black sedan idled at the top of the hill, not close enough to claim involvement, not far enough to pretend it was coincidence. It sat there with its headlights off, like it was watching through the dark. Ethan stood slowly, keeping his body calm, even as something inside him tightened. Shadow's ears angled toward the sedan. She didn't bark. She didn't lunge. She watched. Ethan keyed his radio. "Unit 12 requesting supervisor on scene," he said. "Now," a beat. "Supervisor is Captain Maria Hayes. She's en route." Ethan almost smiled at that. Maria didn't do en route casually. If she was coming, she'd come hard. He turned back to the tow driver, who had returned with a different posture. More confident, like he'd received permission to ignore Ethan. "Officer," the driver called, voice now stiff with authority he didn't earn. "I just got off the phone with—" "Stop," Ethan said. The word wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. It landed like a hand on a chest. The driver froze. Ethan stepped closer, slow and deliberate. He didn't invade space like a bully. He claimed space like a professional. "This is an active scene," Ethan said. "You will stand by your truck until I release you." The driver's face reddened. "You can't—" "I can," Ethan replied. He held the man's gaze. "And you will." Shadow moved half a step forward, not threatening, present, a quiet reminder that some things did not have to get loud to get serious. The driver swallowed. His bravado thinned. "Fine," he muttered. He walked back to his truck, hands shoved into his jacket like resentment could keep him warm. Ethan exhaled slowly. He knelt again, checking the dogs, covering the crate with an emergency blanket from his kit to block the wind. He kept his movements measured. Every sudden motion could turn fear into panic. When the first animal control van arrived, Ethan felt something loosen, just a fraction, until he saw who stepped out. Not a uniformed city worker, a man in a county jacket, no visible badge, moving with the same "I belong here" confidence as the tow driver. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Shadow's growl returned, lower this time, deeper. She didn't like him. The man looked at the crate, then at Ethan. "Officer," he said pleasantly, "we'll take it from here." Ethan didn't move. "No," he said, "you won't." The man's smile held. "These are animals. We have protocols. Transport, processing. Hold, you can't keep them here." "I'm not keeping them," Ethan said. "I'm protecting evidence and living victims. EMS is on the way." The man's eyes flicked, just a fraction, toward the black sedan still idling at the top of the hill. Ethan felt it then, the invisible network, the way power moved through people without showing its face. The man sighed as if Ethan was inconvenient. "Officer Cole," he said, and Ethan's stomach tightened because Ethan hadn't given his name. "It's Christmas Eve. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Ethan's voice stayed even. "Don't make it criminal." The man's smile disappeared. For a moment, the cold felt sharper. Then a familiar vehicle slid onto the shoulder behind Ethan's patrol SUV. Clean approach, no wasted motion. Captain Maria Hayes stepped out. She was pragmatic in every line of her body. Coat zipped high, hair tucked tight, eyes that scanned and assessed like she was counting the cost of every decision. She walked up beside Ethan, took in the crate, the dogs, the tow truck, the county jacket man. Then her gaze returned to Ethan, steady. "You called?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said quietly. Maria's eyes shifted to the county jacket man. "Who are you?" The man recovered his pleasant tone. "County Animal Services. We're here to—" "Show me your credentials," Maria said. He hesitated, a fraction too long. Maria's expression didn't change, but the temperature around her did. "Now?" she said. The man produced an ID. Maria glanced at it, then handed it back like it was dirty. "EMS hasn't arrived," she said. "Animal control doesn't take precedence over medical stabilization, and this is an active police investigation." The man's jaw tightened. "Captain, I was instructed—" Maria stepped closer, voice still calm. "By who?" Silence. Ethan watched the man's eyes. People lied with their mouths, but their eyes always betrayed who they were afraid of. Maria followed the gaze, up the hill toward the black sedan. She didn't react dramatically. She just shifted her stance slightly, placing herself in a way that suggested she could block Ethan if someone tried to touch him. "Officer Cole," Maria said, not looking away from the sedan, "give me a quick timeline." Ethan did. Efficient, factual, skid marks, empty driver's seat, blood at grill, crate, dogs inside, tow arriving too fast, unofficial animal services showing up too early. As he spoke, Maria's expression tightened. "Shadow tracked anything?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said. "She's holding on the crate and the SUV. I haven't allowed her to follow beyond the immediate scene yet. Too many variables." Maria nodded. Approval without praise. "Good," she said. Then she turned to the county jacket man. "You'll stand down until city animal control arrives. If you interfere with this scene, you'll be detained." The man bristled. "Captain." "Detained," Maria repeated. "Is that clear?" The man's face hardened, but he nodded. The black sedan up the hill didn't move. Not yet. Ethan felt the trap forming, not the obvious kind, the kind that waited for a mistake. Maria stepped slightly closer to Ethan, lowering her voice. "This is bigger than it should be," she murmured. Ethan's eyes stayed forward. "Yes, ma'am." Maria's jaw tightened. "You have your body cam on?" Ethan paused. He'd turned it on when he arrived. He always did, but he checked his chest anyway. The small red indicator should have been blinking. It wasn't. Ethan felt the cold in his blood. He looked down, tapped the device. Nothing. Maria's eyes narrowed. "Battery?" "It was full," Ethan said. He kept his voice level, but a pressure built behind his ribs. "It was full when I left the station." Maria stared at the dead camera like it had insulted her personally. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay." Ethan knew that, okay. It meant, this is war, and they want you unarmed. Maria looked at Shadow. "Your K9 cam?" Shadow's harness had a small camera mount, standard for deployments. Ethan checked the unit. It was on, still recording. Ethan exhaled, slow. Maria's eyes flicked to him. "Good. Keep Shadow close. Keep her recording. Do not let anyone separate you from her." "Yes, ma'am." The siren of an ambulance finally cut through the winter silence. The EMTs arrived fast, moved faster once they saw the dogs. One of them, young, energetic, knelt near the crate, face tight with shock. Ethan didn't learn his name. He didn't need to. Names were for people you trusted. Right now, he trusted function, stabilize, transport, survive. Doctor. Lena Moore arrived less than 10 minutes later, coat thrown over scrubs, hair pulled back, eyes already focused like she'd stepped into a puzzle she couldn't walk away from. She didn't waste time with greetings. She crouched near the crate, gloved hands gentle, voice low and steady as she assessed the injuries. Ethan watched her hands. Hands told the truth about who someone was. Lena's hands were careful, competent. They treated pain like something sacred. "These aren't from a crash," Lena said finally, looking up at Ethan. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of certainty. "These injuries are consistent with prolonged jostling, compression, cold exposure, and impact without restraint, transported like objects." Maria's eyes hardened. "Can you document?" "Yes," Lena said. She glanced at Ethan. "Photos? Measurements? If you want this to hold up, you need a chain." Ethan nodded. "I'll get it." Deputy Lucas Reed arrived in a skid of energy, sliding out of his unit like his body ran on caffeine and adrenaline and the belief that he could still make the world fair if he just moved fast enough. He saw the dogs and stopped dead, all humor draining from his face. "Jesus," he whispered. Ethan's voice stayed calm. "Lucas, scene integrity, photographs, witness information, anything that breathes, anything that moves, log it." Lucas swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, sir." He moved, fast, but not careless. That was the thing about Lucas. He was bright enough to listen when Ethan's tone changed. Shadow stayed close to Ethan, head low, eyes scanning. When strangers got too close, she shifted to block. Not aggressive, protective. Ethan felt her at his side like a silent vow. The black sedan finally rolled forward, slow, no urgency, no fear. It pulled onto the shoulder like it belonged there, and two figures stepped out. Dark coats, hands in pockets, faces hidden by hoods and shadow. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't have to. They walked toward Maria, posture easy, as if this was a simple conversation between professionals. Maria moved to meet them, keeping distance. Ethan stayed behind, near the crate, shadow anchored at his knee. He couldn't hear every word, but he heard enough. "Captain Hayes," one of the figures said. They knew her name, too. "Let's keep this quiet. Holiday. Nobody wants a spectacle." Maria's voice stayed level. Nobody wanted animals transported like garbage either. A pause. Then, "Officer Cole has a history," the figure said smoothly. "We've had concerns about his temperament." Ethan felt something tighten in his gut. Not because the lie hurt his feelings, because it was the shape of a trap. Discredit the handler, seize the evidence, rewrite the story. Maria's voice sharpened just slightly. "You don't know Ethan Cole." The figure's tone stayed pleasant. "We know enough." Ethan watched Maria's shoulders. She didn't flinch. She didn't stiffen. She stayed controlled. Then Maria turned her head slightly, just enough for Ethan to see her profile, and she met his eyes. It wasn't a question. It was a command delivered without words. "Stay steady." Ethan looked down at Shadow. Her eyes were on him now, reading the shift in his breathing. Ethan placed a hand on her harness, fingers resting over the camera unit. He felt the vibration of it recording. Good. Let them try to erase what a dog remembered. Ethan looked up, and somewhere inside him, beneath the cold discipline, beneath the calm, something lit. Not rage, purpose. A quiet, unwavering decision. You don't get to make this disappear. The first rule Ethan had learned in training wasn't about violence. It was about time. Time was the only thing you couldn't negotiate with. You couldn't buy it. You couldn't charm it. You couldn't threaten it into slowing down. And right now, time was the enemy. Not because someone might shoot him in the next minute, but because systems didn't need bullets to kill the truth. They just needed a gap, a lost file, a misplaced report, a dead camera, a tow truck arriving too quickly, a winter road that swallowed evidence the way snow swallowed footprints. Ethan stood beside the open crate as the EMTs stabilized the dogs one by one, voices low, hands moving with urgency, masked as calm. Shadow's muzzle hovered close, not interfering, just present, a steadying force for animals whose bodies had learned to expect hands to hurt. Dr. Lena Moore documented everything with the focus of someone translating pain into something a courtroom couldn't ignore. She took measurements, noted swelling and abrasions, checked for frostbite, logged temperature exposure time estimates based on tissue response. It was clinical, but there was a softness under it, like she needed the facts to be sharp because her heart wasn't allowed to be. Deputy Lucas Reed moved around the perimeter, camera clicking, pen scratching on a notepad that was already damp from the cold. He kept looking at the sedan up the hill as if he could will it to evaporate. Captain Maria Hayes stayed between Ethan and the two hooded figures like a door that didn't ask permission to be closed. Ethan watched Maria from the corner of his eye. She wasn't the type to theatrically square her shoulders. Her authority wasn't in her stance, it was in her refusal to be pushed. It had gotten her through a career where half the battles were fought in conference rooms rather than alleyways. The hooded figures spoke quietly, calm voices, polished language, the kind of tone that pretended to be reasonable so the unreasonable request could slide through unnoticed. Mariah's answer stayed simple and unmovable. No, Ethan couldn't hear their exact words anymore. The wind swallowed some of it, but he saw the shape of the exchange, the figure leaning in, Maria turning her head slightly, eyes narrow with professional patience. Then Maria gestured toward the crate. "Those animals leave with City Animal Control and EMS," she said, loudly enough for Ethan to hear. "Not you." One figure's head tilted like it was smiling under the hood. "And what about the scene?" the figure asked. Maria's gaze didn't flicker. "Scene stays locked until we finish documentation." "And Officer Cole?" the figure pressed. Maria's voice sharpened just a degree. "Officer Cole is doing his job." The other figures shifted, weight changing. Ethan saw the subtle sign of irritation, like someone used to being obeyed had forgotten what resistance felt like. "Captain," the figure said, still polite, "people are watching." Maria held the figure's gaze. "Good." For a moment the wind was the only sound. Snow drifted across the road in thin curtains. Then the figures backed away, steps careful, unhurried. They returned to the sedan. The sedan didn't immediately leave. It just sat, watching. Ethan felt Shadow press closer to his leg, a soft point of contact that grounded him. Her eyes tracked the sedan, but her body stayed tuned to Ethan's breathing, her loyalty split between threat and handler. "You okay?" Lucas murmured as he passed behind Ethan. Ethan didn't look at him. "Focus." Lucas nodded fast, cheeks flushed with cold and fury. He moved on. Maria returned to Ethan's side. "Body cam?" she asked quietly. "Dead," Ethan replied. "Shadow's unit is recording." Maria's jaw tightened. "We'll treat Shadow's footage like gold." Ethan nodded. Maria looked at the crate, at the trembling dogs inside. "This was called in as an accident." "Yes, ma'am." Maria's eyes went distant for half a second, the look of someone mentally listing every person who could have shaped that lie. Then she said, "We're going to do this clean." Ethan felt something in his chest loosen. Maria didn't say, "We'll win." She didn't say, "They'll pay." She said clean. That was Maria's version of war. Dr. Lena Moore stood and pulled off one glove, rubbing her hand as if to coax warmth back into it. "They need immediate veterinary care," she said. "One is borderline hypothermic, another has respiratory distress, and—" her voice dipped slightly. "There's one that's worse." Ethan's gaze locked on her. "How bad?" Lena held his eyes. "Bad enough that minutes matter." Ethan looked at Maria. Maria nodded once. "Transport them. We keep evidence chain. Lena, ride with them. Lucas?" Lucas snapped upright. "Yes, ma'am." "You're with me," Maria said. "We're going to log the scene ourselves before anyone touches it." "Ethan—" Ethan waited. Maria's expression softened just slightly. "You're staying with Shadow. You are not separated from that footage. Understood?" Ethan nodded. "Understood." The EMTs lifted the worst-off dog carefully, moving like they were carrying something sacred. City Animal Control arrived in a marked van this time, uniforms, city seal, a driver who looked at Maria like she respected the hierarchy. The difference mattered. It shouldn't have, but it did, because it meant the first attempt to quietly remove the animals had failed. Ethan watched the van doors close, watched Dr. Lena Moore climb in beside the carriers. For a moment he felt helpless, a sensation he hated, because it always came wrapped in old memories, being too late, arriving after the damage was done. Shadow nudged his hand. Ethan exhaled. Not helpless, not late. Not this time. Maria turned to the tow truck driver. You're done here." The driver opened his mouth to protest. Maria's stare shut it. He muttered something and climbed back into his cab. Maria turned to the county jacket man. "And you." The man looked at Ethan briefly, just long enough for Ethan to see the calculation in his eyes. Then he walked away without another word. The sedan finally rolled out, tires whispering on ice. It disappeared into the dark like it had never been there at all. But Ethan didn't believe in disappearing, not for people like that. Maria waved Lucas over. "Let's lock this down. Photos, measurements, skid patterns, footprints. Anything that proves staging." Lucas worked like he was trying to outrun injustice with a clipboard. Ethan moved with them, scanning, spotting details the way he always did. A boot print with a specific tread pattern that didn't match the tow driver's boots, a smear of grease on the embankment that didn't belong in clean snow, a small shard of plastic that looked like it had been snapped rather than broken. Shadow stayed close, head low, nose tasting the air, but she didn't pull. She waited for Ethan's guidance. Ethan trusted her instincts, but he trusted his own discipline too. "Shadow," he murmured, "track." Shadow's head lifted, her ears angled, her body flowed into motion. She didn't go straight to the road. She went to the place where the sedan had parked, nose down, inhaling the snow itself as if it held a record. Then she moved along the shoulder, following something invisible through the drifts. Ethan followed, leash loose but secure. Maria and Lucas followed behind at a distance. Shadow led them past the crash site, away from the ditch, down a side path that was less road and more maintenance access, an unplowed strip that ran along the river's edge. "This isn't on the call sheet," Lucas whispered. Ethan didn't answer, because Shadow's body language had changed again. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate. She was working harder, sorting more scent layers, choosing the correct thread among many. That meant a lot of human activity. Recent. Ethan's mouth went dry. The path ended at a chain-link gate with a city maintenance sign half buried in snow. Authorized personnel only. Behind it, a low warehouse building sat dark and quiet, one exterior light flickering like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to exist. Ethan stared at it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was worse than that. It was ordinary. Ordinary places were where people did unforgivable things because they assumed no one was paying attention. Shadow went to the gate, sniffed the latch, then looked back at Ethan. Her eyes said, "Here." Maria stepped up beside him. "Is this where she's taking you?" "Yes," Ethan said quietly. Maria studied the building. "We need to treat this as connected." Lucas swallowed. "Do we have a warrant?" Maria's eyes flicked to Lucas. "We have probable cause for a related evidence location if animals were staged from here." Lucas nodded, trying to look like he wasn't nervous. Ethan reached for the gate. It was locked. Of course it was. Maria took out her flashlight and shone it along the chain. "Bolt cutters?" she asked Lucas. Lucas glanced at his car. "In the trunk." "Go," Maria said. Lucas ran, boots sliding slightly on ice. Ethan stayed still. He listened. The warehouse wasn't silent. There was a faint hum inside, electricity maybe, or machinery still running, or... Ethan didn't let his mind fill the blank with imagination. He focused on what he knew: a staged crash, a crate of injured dogs, a tow arriving too fast, unofficial animal services trying to take them, hooded figures trying to lean on Maria, a black sedan watching, and now a dark maintenance building linked by Shadow's nose. Patterns. Dr. Lena Moore would translate injuries. Ethan would translate patterns. Maria would translate them into action. Lucas returned with bolt cutters, breath steaming. Maria took them, clipped the chain cleanly. The gate swung open with a metal groan that echoed too loudly. Ethan felt Shadow tense. He steadied her with a quiet touch. They approached the building. Maria went first, hand near her holster. Not because she wanted to shoot someone, because she knew the world didn't care about her intentions. Ethan positioned Shadow to the side, giving her room to work but keeping her close. Lucas stayed behind, flashlight scanning, eyes wide. Maria tried the door. It opened. Unlocked. That was wrong. Ethan's skin prickled. Unlocked doors were either a mistake or an invitation. Maria moved inside. The air hit them like a wall, cold, stale, with an undercurrent of chemicals and something else beneath it. Shadow's nose went down immediately. Ethan's flashlight swept the interior. The warehouse was mostly empty. Stacks of pallets, a few crates, scattered maintenance tools. But near the back wall, a cluster of items sat too neatly arranged: a roll of rope, a plastic tarp, a heavy-duty dolly, and a large floor drain stained dark around the edges. Lucas made a sound, barely a whisper. "What is this place?" Maria's jaw clenched. A problem. Ethan walked closer to the drain. He didn't touch it. He didn't kneel. He simply looked and let his brain do what it did best. The stains weren't fresh, not all of them. Some were old, layered, not one incident, multiple. Shadow moved toward a side room, a door half open, darkness beyond. She paused, then looked back at Ethan. Ethan followed. He shone his light inside. The room was small, like a storage closet converted for something else. Hooks on the wall, a metal ring bolted into the concrete floor. Scratches on the surface like something had fought against it. Lucas swallowed audibly. "Oh my God," Maria's voice was low. "Photographs now!" Lucas lifted his camera with shaking hands. Ethan felt something in his chest harden. Not anger, not yet. A cold clarity. This wasn't an accident scene. This was infrastructure. A place used repeatedly because it was quiet and unimportant, and no one wanted to see what happened in maintenance buildings on Christmas. Shadow's ears flicked. She sniffed, then turned back toward the main area, pulling the leash gently. Ethan followed, letting her lead. She went to a corner where a small trash bin sat. She sniffed it, then sneezed. Hard, sharp. That was her tell. A scent that burned. Ethan stepped closer, careful. He shone his flashlight into the bin. Inside, among discarded gloves and packaging, was a small electronic device. A camera mount. Not Ethan's, not department issued. It looked like a cheap clip-on body cam, the kind someone bought online to record whatever they wanted without oversight. Maria leaned in, eyes narrowing. Lucas whispered, "Is that evidence?" Ethan nodded. Maria's voice turned to steel. "Bag it." Lucas dug into his kit, hands still unsteady, and slid the device into an evidence bag. Maria looked at Ethan. "We need to document everything and get out." Ethan understood what she meant. This place was dangerous not because someone might be inside with a gun. It was dangerous because it represented proof. And proof made people desperate. They finished photographing. Maria marked the location. Lucas recorded timestamps. Ethan stayed beside Shadow, leash secure, camera harness still recording. Then they left, gate closing behind them like a mouth sealing. As they walked back toward the patrol vehicles, Ethan's radio crackled. A different voice this time, a dispatcher's tone that tried to sound neutral and failed. "Unit 12, Captain Hayes, you are requested to return to station immediately." Maria's eyes narrowed. "By who?" Pause, then, "Lieutenant on duty." Maria's jaw tightened. "Name?" Another pause. "Lieutenant Barrett." Maria looked at Ethan, then Lucas. Lieutenant Barrett was not the kind of name you heard in connection with emergency scenes. He was administration. He was optics. He was keep it quiet. Maria keyed her radio. "We're in the middle of an active investigation with evidence of animal cruelty and staging. We will return when the scene is secure." Silence. Then the dispatcher again, softer. "Captain, he said it's about Officer Cole." Ethan felt Shadow shift at his side. Maria's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw the anger under it, the kind of anger that didn't explode because Maria didn't give people the satisfaction. "Copy," Maria said. Her voice went calm in the way it only did when she was preparing to bite. She turned to Ethan. "We're going in, together." Ethan nodded. Lucas looked between them. "What's happening?" Maria's eyes were sharp. "They're trying to control the narrative before we control the evidence." Ethan felt his pulse steady. Good. He preferred direct conflict to hidden sabotage. At least then the enemy admitted the game existed. They drove back to the station through streets strung with Christmas lights. Houses glowed warm behind windows. People were inside with families, thinking the world was safe because the snow made it look clean. Ethan's jaw tightened. Safety was an illusion rich people sold. Truth was what you built when you refused to buy it. At the station, the atmosphere was wrong the second Ethan walked in. Too quiet, too many eyes turning away, too many officers suddenly busy with paperwork they hadn't cared about 10 minutes ago. Maria walked straight down the hall toward the lieutenant's office. Ethan followed with Shadow at his side. Lieutenant Barrett stood when Maria entered. He was a man who looked like he had never been in a fight he couldn't win with policy. "Captain Hayes," he said smoothly, "Merry Christmas." Maria didn't return the greeting. "What is this?" she asked. Barrett's eyes flicked to Ethan. "Officer Cole, sit down." Ethan didn't sit. Shadow didn't move. Barrett's smile tightened. "This is an administrative review," Barrett said. "There have been complaints." Maria's voice was crisp. "From who?" Barrett lifted a hand as if to calm her. "We received a call from a concerned citizen. Claims Officer Cole used excessive force at a scene tonight." Ethan felt the trap fully form. Not a question about the injured dogs. Not a question about the staged crash. A complaint about Ethan. A narrative seeded before the truth could bloom. Maria leaned in slightly. "Lieutenant, Officer Cole's body cam failed on scene. However, Shadow's K9 unit was recording continuously." Barrett's eyes flicked, quick. Ethan caught it. Barrett hadn't known that. That meant someone else had planned for the body cam failure, but hadn't anticipated Shadow. Maria continued. "We also located a secondary evidence site connected by K9 track." Barrett raised his hand. "Captain, stop." Maria's eyes hardened. "Stop?" Barrett's voice stayed measured. "This is no longer within your scope. We're transferring the investigation to county." Ethan's stomach turned cold. Maria's tone sharpened. "County tried to seize the animals before city control arrived." Barrett's smile returned, thin. "County has jurisdictional resources. And frankly, Captain, we don't need this becoming messy." Messy. That was the word systems used when truth threatened to spill onto expensive floors. Maria's voice lowered. "Lieutenant, those animals were victims, and the scene was staged. We have physical evidence." Barrett's expression hardened. "Captain Hayes, that's enough. Officer Cole, until this complaint is resolved, you are relieved of duty pending review." The room seemed to still. Ethan didn't move. Shadow didn't breathe loudly. She simply watched, eyes bright and steady. Maria's face turned to stone. "Lieutenant Barrett, you are making a critical error." Barrett's eyes narrowed. "Captain, watch your tone." Maria stepped closer. "No, you watch yours. You just attempted to remove the only officer who secured living victims and evidence on a staged scene. On Christmas Eve." Barrett's jaw clenched. "This is procedure." Maria's voice was cold. "This is politics." Barrett's gaze flicked to Ethan again. "Officer Cole, surrender your service weapon and your equipment." Ethan felt the moment stretch. This was what they wanted. Separation. Separate Ethan from Shadow. Separate Ethan from footage. Separate Ethan from the only thing keeping the narrative honest. Maria's eyes met Ethan's. "Stay steady." Ethan exhaled. Then he said calmly, "No?" Barrett blinked. "Excuse me?" Ethan's voice remained even. "I will comply with any lawful order that does not compromise evidence chain and officer safety. Shadow's camera is evidence. My equipment logs are evidence. If you want them, you can inventory them under Captain Hayes' supervision, with chain of custody documented." Barrett's face reddened. "You don't get to dictate terms," Maria's voice cut in. "Actually, he does when you're trying to destroy evidence in real time." Barrett's mouth opened. Before he could speak, a voice came from the doorway. "Captain!" Dr. Lena Moore stood there, coat still on, hair slightly disheveled from working. Her eyes were calm, but there was steel under it. "The dogs are at the city animal facility," Lena said. "I documented their injuries, I have photos, I have medical notes, and one is critical." Barrett turned, annoyed. "Doctor, this is internal." Lena's voice stayed steady. "Internal does not override patient welfare or legal documentation of abuse." Barrett's expression tightened. "You're a veterinarian." Lena's eyes didn't blink. "And you're a bureaucrat, so let's both stay in our lanes." Lucas appeared behind Lena, breathless, as if he'd run there. His face was pale. "Captain," Lucas said, voice tight, I heard them talking. The guys upstairs. They said county's already coming for the dogs." Maria's eyes flashed. "Who said?" Lucas swallowed. "Sergeant's office. I heard." Barrett's face turned dangerous. "Deputy Reed, you are not authorized." Maria raised a hand. "Enough," she said. She turned to Ethan. "Ethan, Shadow stays with you. You do not surrender her unit. Lena, you keep your medical documentation secured. Lucas straightened. "Yes, ma'am." "You're with Ethan," Maria said. "You're his second set of hands, chain of custody. If anyone tries to move those dogs, you document everything." Barrett stepped forward. "Captain Hayes, you do not have authority to override." Maria's gaze snapped to him. "Watch me." Then quieter, to Ethan. "Go. Now." Ethan didn't hesitate. He turned and walked out of the office with Shadow at his heel, Lucas right behind. Lena followed, already pulling out her phone to back up her notes. As they moved down the hall, Ethan felt eyes on him. Some officers looked away. Some looked guilty. One or two looked sympathetic and helpless, like they wanted to help but didn't know how to stand up without being crushed. Ethan didn't judge them. Fear was a currency too. But he didn't accept it. They moved fast out to the parking lot, into Ethan's vehicle. Ethan's phone buzzed. 1 bar of service, then 2. A message from Maria. "Do not let them separate you from Shadow. Get that footage duplicated." Ethan stared at it, then looked at Lena. "Can you copy video?" Ethan asked. Lena nodded. "If we can get to a secure computer and external drive." Lucas blurted, "I have a laptop and a hard drive in my car." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Now." Lucas ran to his car, grabbed a bag, returned breathless. Ethan started the engine. Snow swirled in the headlights. He didn't know what County would do next, but he knew what he had to do. Keep Shadow close, keep the footage safe, keep the truth alive long enough to make it untouchable. Shadow sat upright beside him, eyes forward. Ethan reached over, touched her harness gently, felt the small bump of the camera unit. Still recording. "Good girl," he whispered. Shadow's tail thumped once. Not happy. Ready. And somewhere in the city, behind holiday lights and polite phone calls, the system shifted its weight, preparing to crush what Ethan had found. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. "Lucas," he said, calm as winter steel, "we're going to the city animal facility." Lucas swallowed. "What are we going to do?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. "The same thing we've been doing," he said. "We stay steady until the truth can't be moved." Snow started falling harder as they crossed the bridge toward the city animal facility. Not thick flakes. Fine, wind-driven needles that made the world look like it was being sanded down to bone. Ethan drove without speaking. Lucas sat in the passenger seat with his laptop bag clutched to his chest like something fragile. Dr. Lena Moore followed in her own vehicle behind them, headlights steady in the rearview mirror. Shadow sat upright in the back, body aligned with the vehicle's motion, eyes flicking between the side windows and Ethan's reflection. She could feel it. The pressure shift. Ethan felt it too. Not fear, not yet. Something colder. The sense that pieces were being moved on a board he couldn't see, but could predict. Underscore, 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 underscore. The facility, the city animal facility, sat behind a low municipal building, practical and unremarkable. The parking lot was half plowed, snow-banked along the edges like the city had done, just enough to keep things moving, but not enough to make them comfortable. Ethan pulled in hard. 2 vehicles were already there, 1 city-marked van and 1 unmarked black SUV. Lucas stared at it. "That wasn't here before," he said quietly. "No, it wasn't." Ethan killed the engine. "Stay with me," he said. Lucas nodded. Shadow stepped out first when Ethan opened the rear door, boots crunching snow in sync with paws. They moved inside. The lobby was quiet, too quiet for Christmas Eve with emergency intakes. Behind the counter stood a city animal tech Ethan recognized, Sarah Patel, competent, calm under pressure. Her eyes widened when she saw Ethan. "Officer Cole," she said carefully. "Where are they?" Ethan asked. "In isolation. One's critical." She hesitated, then glanced toward the hallway. "County's here." Ethan followed her gaze. At the far end of the corridor stood 2 men in dark coats, different from the ones at Riverside, but cut from the same cloth. Clean shoes, hands clasped loosely in front, not law enforcement posture, observers. Lucas shifted beside Ethan. "Do they have authority?" "Not yet," Ethan replied quietly. Dr. Lena Moore entered behind them, already pulling on gloves as she walked. "I need to check on the critical patient," she said, voice steady. One of the dark-coated men stepped forward. "Doctor," he said smoothly, "we're transferring custody." Lena didn't slow. "Based on what order?" she asked without looking at him. The man smiled. "Jurisdictional adjustment." Ethan's jaw tightened. Shadow stepped slightly forward, body angled between Lena and the man. The man noticed. His smile thinned. "Officer Cole," he said, voice mild, "you've been relieved." Ethan met his eyes. "By who?" he asked calmly. The man held up a phone as if that answered everything. Ethan didn't move. Lena reached the isolation room door and opened it. Inside, 3 dogs lay in separate kennels, heat lamps overhead, IV lines, blankets tucked carefully. One of them lifted its head weakly. Another trembled. The third didn't move much at all. Ethan felt that tightness in his chest again. But this time it wasn't helplessness. It was resolve. Lena stepped inside. "Sarah," she called to the tech, "log my entry and start video documentation." Sarah Patel blinked once, then nodded fast and grabbed a tablet. One of the dark-coated men stepped toward the doorway. "Doctor, that won't be necessary." Ethan moved without raising his voice. He stepped between the man and the room. Shadow mirrored him perfectly. Not lunging, not snarling, just occupying space with absolute certainty. "Do not enter," Ethan said calmly. The man's eyes hardened. "You're obstructing an official process." "Show me the paper," Ethan replied. Silence. Lucas shifted beside Ethan, whispering, "Laptop?" Ethan nodded once. They moved to a side counter in the treatment room, visible, documented, controlled. Lucas opened his laptop with shaking fingers. Ethan unclipped Shadow's camera unit carefully and connected the cable. The device powered on. Green indicator blinking. Recording intact. Ethan let out the smallest breath of relief. "Copy everything," he said. Lucas's fingers flew. File transfer bar appeared on screen. Dr. Lena Moore worked steadily, narrating softly as she examined the dogs. Patient 1, subdermal bruising along ribline, consistent with repetitive impact. Patient 2, early frostbite on distal extremities. Patient 3, labored breathing, possible pulmonary contusion. Her voice was deliberate, clinical, and being recorded. The man in the coat stepped closer. "This is unauthorized duplication of evidence." Ethan didn't look up. "This is preservation," he said. The man's tone sharpened. "You are suspended." Ethan met his gaze finally. "No," he said evenly, "I am preserving a chain of custody." The man's jaw flexed. Lucas whispered, 30% done. Shadow's ears twitched. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. More than 2. Ethan's pulse didn't spike. It steadied. Because this was predictable. When quiet manipulation failed, pressure followed. Underscore 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 the escalation. The facility doors opened again, this time with uniformed county deputies. 4 of them. They moved with the slow certainty of men who believed they were protected. Maria Hayes wasn't with them. That told Ethan everything. A county deputy stepped forward. "Officer Cole," he said, "you're interfering with jurisdictional transfer." Ethan stayed calm. "Transfer of what?" "Evidence." Ethan's eyes flicked to the dogs. "They are patients," he said. "They are evidence," the deputy replied. Lena's voice cut in without looking up. "They are living victims under active medical stabilization. If you attempt removal, you are directly compromising their survival." The deputy ignored her. "Officer Cole, step away from the animals and surrender the recording device." Ethan's gaze sharpened. Shadow shifted her weight subtly. Lucas whispered, 60%. Ethan raised his hand slowly, not surrendering, just visible. "You are attempting to seize evidence before duplication," he said evenly. "Without documentation, without city chain of custody, sign off." The deputy stepped closer. "This is your final warning." Ethan didn't blink. "You are on video," he said quietly. The deputy hesitated, just a fraction. That was enough. Lucas whispered, 85%. The tension thickened. Ethan felt it pressing in on him from all sides. This was the trap, not a fight, a misstep. If he raised his voice, if Shadow growled too loud, if a deputy felt threatened, they would paint him as unstable, aggressive, dangerous, and the narrative would shift before the facts could breathe. He couldn't afford heat. Only ice. Shadow looked up at him, her eyes steady, trusting. Ethan lowered one hand to rest gently on her harness. "Easy," he murmured. The deputy shifted, uneasy with how calm he was. Lucas swallowed. 99. The deputy reached for Shadow's camera unit. Ethan's voice didn't rise. "Do not touch my K9. Shadow's growl vibrated low, not loud enough to escalate, just enough to warn. The deputy froze. Lucas exhaled sharply. "Done." Ethan felt the file transfer complete. He looked at Lucas. "Verify." Lucas nodded, eyes flicking over the files. "Verified. Full copy." Ethan disconnected the cable calmly. He handed the original camera unit to Maria's second-in-command, Lieutenant Torres, who had just arrived behind the deputies. Torres took it carefully. "I've got it," Torres said quietly. The county deputy stepped back slightly. "You think this ends well for you?" one of the dark-coated men muttered. Ethan met his gaze. "It ends with documentation," he replied. The deputy looked around, sensing the shift. The room was small, documented, witnessed, recorded. They couldn't quietly extract the dogs now, not without visible force, and visible force was not subtle. The deputy lowered his hand. "Fine," he said stiffly. "But county is assuming oversight." Ethan nodded once. "Then we'll coordinate," he said. He didn't smile. He didn't smirk. He simply stepped back half an inch, enough to show compliance without surrender. The deputies retreated toward the hallway. The dark-coated men followed, but not without one last look. A look that promised this wasn't over. Ethan knew it wasn't, but something had shifted. They had tried to isolate him, separate him from Shadow, seize the footage, control the animals, control the narrative. And It hadn't worked. Not cleanly. The system pushes back. Maria arrived 20 minutes later. Snow dusted her shoulders. Her expression was iron. "They tried to pull you," she said quietly. "They did," Ethan replied. Maria looked at Torres. "Where's the footage?" "Secure," Torres said, "duplicated twice." Maria nodded once. Then she turned to Lena. "How bad?" Lena removed her gloves slowly. "The third dog needs surgery within hours," she said. "Internal bleeding likely. The others will stabilize." Maria exhaled. "Can we move them?" she asked. Lena hesitated. "The critical one is risky to transport, but staying here isn't secure." Ethan looked at Maria. She understood the subtext. County could try again. Quietly, later. "We move them," Maria said. Ethan nodded. "I'll escort." Maria looked at him carefully. "You're technically suspended." Ethan met her gaze. "You're technically still captain." Maria held his eyes for a long second. Then she said, "Escort." Lucas blinked. "Yes, ma'am." The quiet war. As the dogs were prepped for transport, Ethan stepped outside into the snow. Shadow followed. The night air hit his face. Cold, honest. He stood beside the patrol vehicle and looked out across the empty lot. His phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. Then 5 more. Lucas stepped out behind him. "Sir," Lucas said carefully, "you might want to see this." He held up his phone. On the screen, a video clip. Ethan, at Riverside, fists raised, Shadow lunging forward. A frame freeze. Caption, "Unstable officer attacks civilians during Christmas Eve traffic incident." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "They cut out the dogs," Lucas whispered. "They cut out everything." Ethan watched the clip once. Then again. It was edited cleanly, just enough to suggest aggression, not enough to show context. And it was spreading. Comments rolling in, anger, condemnation, calls for suspension. Ethan's jaw tightened. The narrative was moving. Fast. Maria stepped out of the building, phone in hand. "They flipped it," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. Shadow pressed against his leg. Ethan knelt briefly, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm still steady," he whispered. Shadow's tail thumped once. Maria stepped closer. "They're counting on you reacting," she said. "I won't," Ethan replied. Maria studied him. "You sure?" Ethan looked at the dark sky above the facility. Snow drifting. Lights flickering in distant houses. People inside believing what they saw on a screen. He inhaled slowly. "They want heat," he said. "They're getting ice." Maria nodded. "Good." Inside the van, the critical dog whimpered weakly. Lena called out, "We need to move." Ethan stood. He looked at Maria. "What's the play?" he asked. Maria's eyes were sharp. "We build something they can't edit." Ethan nodded. The quiet war had begun. Not fists, not gunfire, documentation, duplication, truth, and Shadow at his side. Snow thickened as the transport van pulled out of the facility. The critical dog lay secured inside, IV line taped carefully, heat packs positioned around its body. Dr. Lena Moore sat braced beside the carrier, one hand steady on the metal frame to absorb every bump in the road. Ethan followed directly behind in his patrol unit. Shadow sat upright in the rear compartment, eyes forward, posture unchanged from the moment the night had turned. Lucas monitored his phone in the passenger seat. The smear video was spreading faster now. Local groups, regional feeds, a few verified accounts. Someone had prepared this, not in reaction, in anticipation. "They had this cued," Lucas muttered. "There's no way they cut that together this fast." Ethan didn't respond, because Lucas was right. This wasn't improvisation. This was choreography. The vanishing footage. Halfway to the emergency veterinary hospital across town, Maria's voice came over the radio. "Ethan, update." "Go," he replied. "Station just reported your body cam malfunction logged as user error." Ethan felt his pulse settle into something harder. "Battery was full," he said calmly. "I know," Maria replied. "It says there was a firmware glitch." Lucas let out a disbelieving laugh. "Firmware glitch on Christmas Eve." Maria continued. "They're moving to formalize suspension before morning." Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened, not out of panic, but focus. "Timeline?" he asked. "Sunrise," Maria said. "They want it wrapped before state offices reopen." Because once the state saw the documentation, the control shifted. "They're accelerating," Lucas whispered. "Yes," Ethan said. Because they knew what Ethan knew now. This wasn't a single-staged crash. It was scheduled, deliberate, repeated. And something about tonight had forced their hand. The pattern. At the emergency veterinary hospital, the transfer moved quickly. Lena stayed inside with the critical dog. The other 2 stabilized animals were moved into heated recovery. Maria arrived 10 minutes later. Her coat was dusted white. Her expression said she hadn't slowed once. "Update," she said. Lena emerged from surgery prep, voice tight but controlled. "The 3rd dog has internal bleeding. I'm taking it in now." Ethan nodded. "Do what you need," he said. Lena held his gaze for half a second. "I will." She disappeared through swinging doors. Maria turned to Ethan and Lucas. "Walk me through the warehouse again." Ethan did, slowly, detail by detail. The floor drain, the metal ring, the scratch marks, the secondary camera unit. Lucas added, "There were no random items. Everything looked arranged." Maria nodded once. "That's staging infrastructure," she said. Ethan agreed. "They weren't improvising," he said. Maria's eyes sharpened. "Scheduled?" Ethan nodded. "Shadow tracked from the crash site to that facility. That means the animals came from there." Lucas frowned. "Or were staged there," he said. Ethan looked at him. "Exactly." Maria crossed her arms. "Christmas morning," she said quietly. Lucas blinked. "What about Christmas morning?" Maria looked at Ethan. "They tried to remove the animals before sunrise," she said. "Tried to take control of evidence before morning." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Clean up," he said. Lucas felt it too. "Oh," Maria nodded. "They planned this timeline," she said. "Night incident, quick removal, quiet burial before public attention." Ethan exhaled slowly. "And we interrupted the clock." Maria met his eyes. "Yes." The second trail. Ethan stepped outside with Shadow. The snow had softened to a steady fall now. The hospital parking lot lights cast halos in the flakes. Shadow's ears twitched. Ethan crouched beside her. "Still with me?" he asked quietly. Shadow's eyes met his, steady, unquestioning. He clipped her leash. "Let's work." Lucas jogged over. "Work?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "They staged at the warehouse. They transported tonight. That means vehicles." Lucas's eyes widened slightly. "Fuel trail?" Ethan nodded. Shadow had locked onto a scent earlier. Not just the dogs, not just the warehouse. A secondary chemical note, distinct, synthetic, industrial. Ethan led her to the edge of the parking lot, where the transport van had idled before departure. He gave her the quiet command. Shadow lowered her nose and inhaled. Then she turned, not toward the hospital, toward the service road beyond. Maria joined them. "You think they're still moving?" she asked. "I think they planned something for morning," Ethan replied. Shadow began moving, steady, controlled. Ethan followed. They crossed the hospital's rear lot, moved along a plowed maintenance strip, then toward an unlit industrial access lane that paralleled the river. Lucas checked his watch. 3 hours until sunrise, he said. Ethan nodded. Snow muted their steps. Shadow's body language changed subtly, less exploratory, more committed. She had found something consistent. Maria's breath fogged in the air. "This better not be what I think it is," she muttered. The lane curved toward a private riverside property. Low fencing, dark outbuildings, no holiday lights. Ethan slowed. Shadow's ears rose. There were tire tracks in the snow, fresh, leading inside. Maria's jaw clenched. "This is private land," she said. Ethan's eyes scanned. The gate was closed, but not locked. He felt the pattern tightening. Warehouse, crash, attempted removal, smear campaign. Now? Fresh tracks? Scheduled? Maria stepped beside him. "If we're wrong?" "We're not," Ethan said quietly. Maria held his gaze, then nodded once. "Let's be careful." The riverside property. The property was quiet in the way that felt unnatural. No porch light, no visible movement, just the low silhouette of a large storage shed near the riverbank. Shadow moved forward slowly. Ethan followed. Lucas stayed back, phone recording now as backup. Maria had her hand near her holster, but not drawn. They approached the shed. The door was slightly ajar. Ethan's pulse didn't spike. It slowed. Shadow stiffened. Inside. He heard it. Metal shifting. A low engine hum. Ethan stepped closer. The interior lights flicked on. 3 men stood inside, not hooded this time, visible. One held a clipboard. Another leaned against a pickup truck backed into the shed. In the truck bed, empty transport crates, clean, prepared. The man with the clipboard smiled. "You're early," he said calmly. Maria stepped beside Ethan. "You're late," she replied. The man's smile widened slightly. "We're just preparing for routine maintenance," he said smoothly. Ethan's eyes moved to the crates, the same make, the same latch type. He stepped forward. Shadow moved with him. "You're staging transport," Ethan said. The man shrugged. "We're moving property." Ethan's voice stayed level. "Of what?" The man didn't answer. One of the others shifted, annoyed. "Officer," he said, "you're trespassing." Maria stepped forward. "On a property with matching infrastructure to an active cruelty investigation," she said coolly, "with fresh tire tracks matching a staged accident scene." The man's smile faltered slightly. Ethan's eyes moved to the floor. There, a tarp, folded, still damp at the edges, snow melting off something recently removed. Shadow stepped toward it. She sniffed. Then she froze. Her head lifted slowly. Ethan felt it instantly. That shift. The kind that meant something living had been here. Very recently. And not willingly. Lucas whispered, "This is it." The man with the clipboard took a small step back. "You have no warrant," he said, voice tightening. Maria didn't blink. "We have probable cause." Ethan crouched near the tarp. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. He could see faint indentations in the snow beneath. Crate-sized, recently removed. The timing clicked into place. They had planned to move more animals at dawn, maybe even tonight. Maybe they'd already moved some. And Ethan had thrown the schedule off by intercepting the crash. The clipboard man's calm cracked just slightly. "You don't understand what you're interfering with," he said. Ethan stood. "You're right," he said quietly, "because you haven't told me yet." The man's jaw tightened. One of the others shifted toward the pickup. Shadow's head snapped up. A low growl rolled through her chest. Not loud, but final. Ethan's voice stayed calm. Hands visible. The man froze. Maria's tone sharpened. "Step away from the vehicle." The man hesitated, then complied. Lucas kept filming. Ethan moved slowly toward the truck bed. Empty crates, but beneath them, a phone, face down. Ethan looked at the man. "You dropped something," he said. The man's composure shattered for half a second. That was all Ethan needed. He picked up the phone. The screen lit, unlocked, on a group chat, messages scrolling. "Move them before sunrise." "Crash worked. Cole interfered." "Switch location. Clean up at Riverside." Ethan's heartbeat remained steady. Ice, always ice. He turned the phone so Maria could see. Maria's eyes hardened to steel. "You just made this federal," she said quietly. The man lunged. Not for Ethan, for the phone. Shadow exploded forward, but controlled. She intercepted, snapping at air inches from the man's wrist. The man recoiled instinctively. Ethan stepped back. Phone secure. Maria drew her weapon, not pointing, but visible. "Do not move," she commanded. Snow swirled through the open shed door. The river beyond creaked under ice. The world felt suspended. The man's breathing quickened. Ethan's did not. He looked at the phone again, scrolled. There were timestamps, schedules, drop points, warehouse, Riverside, and something else. A reference to a third site. Maria saw it too. Her jaw clenched. "This wasn't random," she said. Ethan nodded. It was organized. Shadow stood beside him, body taut, eyes locked on the men. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout victory. He simply said, "You're done." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Maria had already made the call, and this time, they weren't coming to remove evidence. They were coming to witness it. The first county unit arrived with lights but no siren. The second came louder. Then a state cruiser. Snow churned under tires. Red and blue strobes fractured against the shed walls, turning the interior into a shifting grid of color and shadow. The three men inside the shed stood still now, not calm, contained. Ethan didn't look at them anymore. He focused on the phone in his hand. The group chat was still open. Messages continued to populate in real time. Status? Riverside clear? Confirm removal before 0600. Maria leaned in slightly. "Screen record it," she said quietly. Lucas stepped forward with his own phone and began capturing. Ethan didn't interrupt the chat. He didn't respond. He let it continue. Because active communication meant active coordination, and coordination meant conspiracy. One of the county deputies stepped into the shed. He looked from the men to Maria to Ethan. "What's going on?" he asked. Maria's voice was flat. Evidence of coordinated animal cruelty, staging of an accident, attempted destruction of evidence, and obstruction. The deputy glanced at the clipboard man. Recognition flickered, just briefly. Ethan saw it. The deputy masked it quickly, but it was enough. This wasn't an isolated ring. It was networked. The deputy's tone shifted slightly. "Let's keep this orderly," he said. Ethan handed him the phone. "Chain of custody," he said calmly. "Timestamp screen capture in progress." The deputy hesitated, then took the device carefully. Behind them, more officers entered. One began photographing the crates. Another walked toward the tarp. Ethan stepped back. Shadow stayed at his side, not restless, not excited, just ready. The clipboard man's composure began to crack. "You don't know what you're doing," he muttered. Maria turned toward him. "Oh," she said quietly, "I do." The provocation. It happened fast, too fast to be coincidence. One of the men near the pickup truck suddenly shoved a deputy aside and bolted toward the shed exit. Not toward freedom, toward the patrol vehicles, toward Ethan. Shadow reacted instantly. She moved to intercept. Ethan stepped into her path, not blocking her, but adjusting her angle. "Hold," he commanded. Shadow froze mid-stride. The fleeing man charged straight at Ethan, arms wide, yelling something indistinct. It looked like an attack. It was meant to look like an attack, because cameras were rolling, phones were out, deputies were watching. The man wanted contact, wanted impact, wanted Ethan to escalate. Ethan did not move. He waited. At the last possible second, he pivoted, redirecting the man's momentum with minimal force. The man stumbled past him into a snowbank. Deputies tackled him immediately. Shadow did not bite, did not lunge, did not overreact. She remained exactly where Ethan had placed her. Ice, always ice. Maria watched the entire exchange. So did the county deputy. The clipboard man's shoulders slumped slightly. The trap had failed. Ethan exhaled slowly. His pulse never rose above steady. Lucas whispered under his breath, "They were trying to trigger you." "I know," Ethan replied quietly. The third sight. As deputies secured the men and photographed the scene, Maria stepped back beside Ethan. "There's a third sight," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Mentioned in the chat." Maria looked toward the river. "Coordinates?" Ethan checked the message thread again, carefully scrolling through earlier entries. "There, pinned message, a location reference. Not an address, but a shorthand code." Lucas leaned over. That's the old marina property," he said. Maria's jaw tightened. "That's 3 locations," she said. "Warehouse, riverside shed, marina, pattern, infrastructure, scheduled movement." "Christmas morning," Ethan said quietly. Maria nodded. They planned a full rotation. "Move animals. Stage accident if needed. Remove before sunrise. Clean the sites." Ethan looked at the men being cuffed. This wasn't random cruelty. It was an operation. The smear backfires. Lucas's phone buzzed again. He looked down. His eyes widened. "Sir?" Ethan glanced at the screen. The smear video was still circulating. But beneath it, a new clip. Shadow's footage, edited by someone sympathetic. Full context, the crate, the dogs, the tow truck, the attempted removal, and Ethan's voice, calm, controlled. "Cancel the tow. Living victims. Do not enter." The clip was spreading. Fast. Someone had gotten it. Someone inside the station, or someone who believed in documentation. Maria's phone buzzed as well. "State Investigative Unit just requested direct copy," she said. Ethan nodded once. Because now, the narrative wasn't controlled by whoever had released the smear. It was contested, publicly, and the public could see both versions. Ice, it always held longer than heat. The internal pressure. The county deputy approached Maria. His voice was lower now. "We're going to need statements." Maria nodded. "You'll get them." He hesitated. "Captain, this is going to go higher than us." Maria's eyes didn't waver. "Good." The deputy held her gaze, then nodded once. Behind them, the clipboard man was being read his rights, his face pale now. The shed no longer felt like his territory. The river wind pushed snow through the open door. Shadow sniffed the air once more. Ethan felt it too, the pressure easing. But not gone, not yet. The call. Ethan's phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered. "Cole." Silence for half a second. Then a smooth voice. "You've complicated something you don't understand." Ethan didn't respond immediately. He let the silence stretch. You planned removal before sunrise, Ethan said calmly. You failed. The voice chuckled softly. You think this ends with 3 men and a shed? Ethan's eyes stayed on the river. I think it ends with documentation. The voice sharpened slightly. You're suspended. Ethan's tone did not change. Temporary. You're finished in this town. Ethan exhaled slowly. I was finished when I showed up tonight. Silence. Then the line went dead. Maria stepped closer. Who? Someone who won't call again, Ethan said. Maria studied him. You good? Ethan nodded. Shadow nudged his knee. He rested a hand on her head briefly. Yeah, he said. He was. Because now, it wasn't hidden. It wasn't whispered. It was visible. On video. On record. Time-stamped. Duplicated. The transfer of control state investigators arrived within the hour. Not rushed. Deliberate. They walked the shed, photographed everything again, reviewed the phone, reviewed Shadow's footage, reviewed Lena's medical documentation. No raised voices, no theatrical confrontation, just steady, methodical intake. The kind that signaled control had shifted upward. Maria stood beside Ethan as a state investigator approached. You, Officer Cole? The investigator asked. Yes. The investigator nodded once. You maintain chain of custody? Yes. The investigator's eyes flicked to Shadow. K-9 unit recorded? Yes. The investigator nodded again. Good work. Not praise. Acknowledgement. Ethan accepted it the same way he accepted everything. Calm. The moment. As the scene wound down and suspects were transported, the snow finally slowed. The river quieted. The shed lights dimmed. Ethan stood at the edge of the property, looking out across the frozen water. Lucas approached. You know, Lucas said quietly, most people would have swung. Ethan glanced at him. At what? When he charged you, Lucas said. Ethan looked back at the river. They needed me to, he replied. Lucas nodded slowly. Yeah. Shadow pressed against Ethan's leg again, not anxious, not tense, just present. Maria joined them. It's not over, she said. I know, Ethan replied. They'll try something else, Maria added. Ethan nodded. They already did. Maria studied him. You stayed steady. Ethan looked down at Shadow. She helps. Shadow's ears flicked at the sound of his voice. Maria allowed the smallest hint of a smile. Sunrise in an hour, she said. Ethan looked toward the horizon. The faintest line of pale blue touched the dark edge of the sky. Christmas morning. They had planned to erase everything before it arrived. Instead, they were being processed, documented, transferred. Ethan felt the tension in his chest shift. Not gone, but different. Not reactive, purposeful. The quiet war had moved into daylight, and daylight was harder to edit. By the time the first edge of sunlight touched the river, the third site was already secured. The old marina property sat a mile downstream from the riverside shed, quiet docks half buried in snow, empty slips, a storage building with peeling paint, and a rusted sign that hadn't been updated in years. State investigators moved through it methodically. No rushing, no shouting, just cameras clicking, gloves snapping, evidence bags sealing. Ethan stood back this time, not because he wasn't involved, but because control had officially shifted, and that was the point. The marina storage building mirrored the others, drain in the concrete, industrial cleaner stacked in crates, portable heaters, transport crates, 2 still folded flat against the wall. Empty, prepared, scheduled, but unused, because the timeline had fractured, because the crash hadn't been clean, because Shadow had smelled blood, because Ethan had said no. A state investigator approached Maria and Ethan. We've confirmed cross-references between all 3 locations, she said. Chat logs tie them together. Timestamp alignment suggests recurring operation windows. Holiday traffic, Maria said quietly. Low patrol density, the investigator added. Ethan looked at the snow-covered docks. Routine, predictable. The kind of operation that grew bold because no one disrupted it. Until someone did. The collapse. By mid-morning, the smear video had reversed direction. Shadow's footage, complete and uncut, had overtaken the narrative. The crate, the dogs, the attempted removal, the group chat messages, the coordinated cleanup plan. People weren't arguing anymore. They were asking questions, loudly. News outlets picked it up. State-level oversight was no longer optional. County officials issued statements that felt defensive before they even reached print. Lieutenant Barrett stopped answering calls. The tow company released a miscommunication apology. The black sedan hadn't been seen again, but it didn't matter. The infrastructure was visible now. Warehouse, riverside shed, marina, pattern, schedule, coordination, documented, duplicated, immutable. The aftermath. At the emergency veterinary hospital, the critical dog survived surgery. Barely. Lena stepped into the hallway around noon, exhaustion lining her face but relief anchoring her posture. "He's stable," she said quietly. Ethan felt something inside him release for the first time since the crate door had opened. "Thank you," he said. Lena shook her head. "Thank you," she replied. Shadow stood beside Ethan, watching Lena as if she understood the shift in energy. Lucas leaned against the wall, scrolling through updates. "You're trending," he muttered. Ethan looked at him. Lucas held up his phone. Clips of Shadow standing guard. Clips of Ethan redirecting the charging suspect without escalation. Clips of Lena documenting injuries. Clips of Maria refusing to stand down. The caption under one of them read, "This is what calm under pressure looks like." Ethan didn't smile, but something in his chest felt lighter. Not pride, not triumph. Just quiet. The meeting. 2 days later, Ethan sat in a state oversight office with Maria beside him. Not in uniform, not suspended, not cleared yet either, just in review. The state investigator laid out the findings. "Coordinated animal cruelty ring," she said. "Multiple sites, scheduled transport, attempted staging of accidents to conceal movement." She looked at Ethan. "Your K9 footage was critical." Ethan nodded once. "Shadow did her job," he said. The investigator allowed the smallest smile. "So did you." Maria leaned back slightly. "County oversight has been temporarily reassigned," the investigator continued. "Internal investigations are underway." Ethan didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. The system had been forced into daylight, and daylight required paperwork. Paperwork required answers. Answers required accountability. The quiet return. That evening, Ethan walked along the river with Shadow. Snow still lined the banks, but the sky was clear now, no sirens, no flashing lights, just the sound of water moving under ice. Shadow walked slightly ahead, diddy-yo, nose occasionally dipping toward old tracks already fading. Ethan kept his hands in his coat pockets. His suspension had been lifted that afternoon, quietly, without ceremony, no apology, no formal recognition. Just a memo. But that didn't matter, because this hadn't been about recognition. It had been about protection. He stopped near the spot where Riverside curved into maintenance access. The skid marks were gone now. Snow had reclaimed the surface, as if nothing had happened. But Ethan knew better. Snow erased footprints. It didn't erase memory. Shadow stopped beside him. She looked up. Ethan crouched, resting his forehead gently against hers. "You stayed steady," he murmured. Shadow's tail thumped softly against the snow. He stood again, looked toward the river. The world hadn't become gentle. It hadn't apologized. It hadn't promised to stop producing people who believed they were untouchable. But something had shifted, because this time he hadn't let heat take over. He hadn't given them the reaction they wanted. He had stayed calm long enough to make the truth permanent. Maria's voice echoed in his memory. The strongest man in the storm is the one who stays steady long enough to make the truth permanent. Ethan inhaled the cold air deeply. The noise in his chest, the old static, felt quieter. Not gone, but quieter. Shadow leaned gently against his leg, and that was enough.